I think they can go all season undefeated. I really can. I think they're that good a team. Yeah, I can't see how, at this moment in time, how anyone can take points.
Mark, I think we just got to accept that they've got a manager in Jose Mourinho who gets the job done. He don't care how he gets it done.
I can imagine Mourinho finding that incredibly frustrating. Why have you appointed me? You've appointed me for me to be me. I wasn't born in Manchester. Get over it, sort of thing. So.
If they were playing a better team, if they performed like that and they were playing against Man City, we could be looking at a Celtic result, a 7 or more.
I think that's a big ask because when you get further into the season and the Champions League games and the latter stages,
they're that good.
The only trouble they've got is that the team down the road are putting pressure on them because they're playing such attractive football and they're winning doing it in that.
Never commit too many people forward. Don't try and take City on in a game of football and ride your luck.
Let's look a little bit ahead, Graham. Good news for you. I know you're covering the game on Sunday against Man City. Paul Pogba's not playing. Tell us, how did Manchester United go about beating this wonderful Manchester City team?
Well, there won't be any change in City's game plan. They'll come out and try and dominate the ball, be on the front foot all the time. I think we've mentioned it several times already tonight. United could worry anybody with the pace they have up front. They've got genuine pace. So you can see City having a lot of the ball, United sitting deep, although that's Old Trafford, and breaking on them. That would be the most obvious route. But what you're asking United to do, which isn't impossible because of the players they've got, and more importantly, the goalkeeper they've got, is to sit and defend deep, never commit too many people forward, don't try and take City on in a game of football, and ride your luck. Not that you got a bit
similar
of
to last Saturday?
Well, they were better than that last week, but they're not. Arsenal were be easier to play against than what City will be. City are not unbeatable. They have shown in recent weeks they're not firing all cylinders, and United will fancy themselves, No
chance. Okay.
Manchester United against Manchester City the next weekend. Obviously, we'll be talking about it in detail throughout the week. Looking at it, do City have a little bit more of a vulnerability about them than maybe we thought, despite this incredible run?
I think we've looked at City and seen their ability going forward, and certainly some cracks defensively. If you can actually possess the ball and get that through that initial pressure quickly, which not many teams have done. The one thing that Robo was talking about, we've always known that they're going to be susceptible to corner kicks, to free kicks, balls played into the penalty area, and that was just emphasized here. And so, does things change for this game after we've seen what's happened the last few games? No. I think everybody understands City's vulnerability, whether or not you can have that precision ball into the penalty area that you need to be able to break down a Manchester City. Hopefully, that's what United's probably going to be looking for them to be able to break things down, especially now that you don't have Pogba and you don't have the ability to have that presence in midfield to deal with that initial pressure, to connect that ball we were talking about earlier in the show. Listen, I think City is a phenomenal team. I do think there was one surprise. I thought Michael Antonio playing center forward was a brilliant move by David Moyes.
Oh, you love David Moyes. You love David.
Just one final thing on the late goals as well. Manchester United have actually scored more late goals, and when we talk about late goals, we're talking about 81st minute onwards. United have actually scored more late goals than City. However, City's late goals have actually earned them 9 points to just a couple for United.
Yeah, and look, like I said, this week, the celebration after the game at Southampton when they scored that goal, it was a worry for every Manchester United player, every Manchester United supporter, because that used to be Manchester United. Now it's Man City, and it's a worry for the rest of the Premier League.
Let's not give away too many set pieces, and we might be all right. Would you just change the system a little bit defensively?
I think so, because I just don't think it doesn't matter how good you are at headering the ball. What all those clips have in common is that the attacking players are on the move and the defending players are stationary. As a defender, you're always at a disadvantage. No matter how strong or big you are in the air, it's very difficult to win that ball.
The biggest problem for away teams is actually getting that high up the pitch
to get the corner.
To actually get a corner. So you can say they've got a massive weakness, but actually the biggest problem is actually winning a corner against this team that dominates.
Clash of the Titans, a collision of egos. You've guessed it.
I'm talking about United v City, or more pointedly, about Jose v Pep. So a nice easy question to start with, Johnny. Who's the better coach?
Well, it's like the is Messi better than Ronaldo question in management. I mean, when I look at those two, the first thing I think is, who would I least rather want to go for a pint with? Because they're both completely obsessive, self-obsessive guys who I think live in their own world, and very hard to get a sense of them outside football management. I think a sort of simple answer would be, I think Guardiola is the outstanding creative coach of his generation, and Mourinho is probably the outstanding reactive coach. It's two different schools, and they've both reached the pinnacle of those schools. Maybe who you prefer just comes down to how you see football. Personally, I would go with Guardiola because I think he creates things. I think he's created team after team that has a stamp, a way of playing football. He's created players, he's brought joy, and he's won as much as Mourinho. I mean, Mourinho's statistically got more trophies, but Guardiola's been doing it in a shorter period of time. So personal preference, Guardiola, but I know you could make a different argument for Jose Mourinho, and it'd be pretty convincing.
Let's try and break it down then, Ali, if we can, into sort of specifics. What about their man management styles?
They're not that dissimilar, actually, I would argue. If you're a player and you buy into the cult of those two managers, they will look after you properly. So the way that Jose Mourinho has been with Fellaini this season, I think, is very instructive, because he's nurtured him and he's made sure that the crowd have been on his side. I don't believe in booing your own players, but that did happen at Old Trafford. And I think that's very clever man management. He's turned a very important player, but a fringe player, arguably, into someone that the crowd will embrace and has bigger repercussions. So when Fellaini comes on, instead of the crowd thinking, oh, we're being negative, or we're going to go long ball, this is a bad thing, Mourinho's managed to create this sense that he's someone he can rely on. Similarly, Pep will nurture those players if he feels they are doing as he used to do as a player, always open to learning, work very hard, never questioning the system. Someone like Raheem Sterling, you can see he's clearly pressing the right buttons for that player and going through. But on the flip side, you've got someone like Aguero, who we all felt very privileged to have in the Premier League. He has been criticising him, and he criticised him this weekend as well, as someone who's... the poor chap had a car accident. It's bound to have an effect. But the way Pep describes it, you sort of half think, is he having a go at him for being in the wrong place at the wrong time? And Mourinho did that with Luke Shaw.
He did, yeah.
And you think, well, what's the narrative here? If you don't play it right as the player with those managers, you've had it. But somehow it makes everyone else feel extra special that they're in the gang.
Yeah. Who do you think is best at actually developing players, working with them on a training ground?
That is probably the biggest argument for Pep Guardiola in his favour, just simply because of the talents that he's taken and put into the sort of stratosphere in football terms.
Sterling's a very recent case in point, isn't it?
Exactly, he's doing it with Sterling. I know that he's worked very closely with detail, and that's what he does. He's a very detailed coach. So, for example, he's worked on how Sterling receives the ball. Sterling used to, at Liverpool, when he came through, that was one of the things at Liverpool that they saw. His receiving skills were incredible, but he lost that. He was starting to get the ball and try and stop on it and then try and beat a man, and he'd lost that thing that he did when he was a kid, which was just to take it and go into space. Guardiola's seen that and he's restored that, and it's little details like that, changing the way they think. Again, with Sterling saying to him, I will come down on you if you don't try and beat a man. The absolute opposite to Pellegrini, who wanted Sterling just to be a kind of winger who touch the ball and cross it, which isn't his game, and put negatives in his mind. So I think that's, you look at the Bayern Munich players, the young players like Kimmich that he brought through, players like Philip Lahm, mature players that he changed, and he's doing that with David Silva and Kevin De Bruyne. And of course the work he did at Barca. I know he inherited Messi, and Messi was already an outstanding talent, But the fact is that Pep Guardiola was the coach that took Messi from there to being possibly the greatest ever, and you know, he was given the right type of management at that time. So that's his biggest you know, advantage over Mourinho, who's young players maybe not quite as forte.
Because we're talking there of the private rituals, the behind closed doors stuff that goes on a training ground. What about within the public domain and their personalities? Who plays that public game the best, Mourinho or Guardiola?
Well, we know, you know, familiarity does breed some contempt, and we know Mourinho really well. We have a narrative with him. He arrived and called himself the special one. And it's been a series of love affairs with Mourinho, actually. We fell in love with him, and then we fell out of love with him, and then we fell in love with him again, and then we fell out of love with him again, and then we watched him from afar and his antics abroad. So we feel like he's just a film script on his own.
Yeah.
Whereas Pep Guardiola, this is his, you know, second season here. I think we're struggling slightly to know him properly. And just lately, we're seeing glimpses of him being maybe just as eccentric as Mourinho is capable of being.
What, the PSG stuff and the PSG, and basically be very openly courting him. Now, or was that just part of a contract negotiation? Look, I've got 18 months left on my contract. If you don't love me enough, I'm going to go to PSG.
Oh, well, I mean, Mourinho does not stop with that sort of stuff. I mean, he was briefing his own players, I heard, that he was off to PSG because he wanted that out there so that he could make sure he got everything he needed at Old Trafford. I mean, he's much more openly Machiavellian than Pep Guardiola. It's almost like Pep Guardiola is having to tell us what he is. So he's telling us, I cannot control my emotions. He's telling us I am obsessive. Mourinho doesn't have to tell you what he is. We can see it more openly, I think.
I mean, when I said I wouldn't want to go for a pint with either of them, I did mean that. I'm sure they won't invite me, but I think one of the things is that they do both exist in their own very, very self-obsessed worlds. There's cults around both of them.
Yeah.
They're both similar in the way that they surround themselves with entourages, acolytes. You know, Guardiola's insulated with layers of people around him, and Mourinho's got his faithful retinue of goons almost that are with him all the time on the bench. And it's hard to imagine either of them having a real life outside football. I don't think they really do. I know Pep had this, you know, year in New York, and he got on with Gary Kasparov, but you know, he also said he can't go 32 minutes without talking or thinking about football. He's admitted that himself. So I'm not sure how much there is outside of football to these.
But isn't this a way of sport? You know, I can look back at Ayrton Senna against Alan Prost, and there are direct parallels there where if you take Senna as being the Pep example, he was someone who almost was, he had this Zen calm which could suddenly break into this huge anger, whereas Prost was much more manipulative and probably more emotionally driven consistently. So is this because these guys operate at the top of their game and that's just how it has to be?
Yeah, I think it's really hard to be such an elite manager and not be absolutely 100% driven, and probably slightly deluded to just ignore everything, ignore the opposite point of view, ignore any criticism, ignore the pitfalls, and have that level of conviction, because conviction is behind both of their management styles. You know, Guardiola, it's my way, it's 100% this style of football or nothing, and as Ali said, Mourinho, it is you are with me or you're nothing, and there is no in between.
What about recruitment, Ali? Because you know, you look at that City team, 400 million. Incidentally, how on earth did they buy Mangala? Is he the worst £43 million player you've ever seen?
Yeah, struggling to think of one worse. But he doesn't.
Renato Sanchez, it's the only contender.
Yeah, we're talking 43 million now. Yeah. But you know, yeah, if you've got that amount of money, and
is it simply a case of going out and getting the best player?
You're going to make, if you can afford to make a mistake, you will. It's not. It's different at City. You can afford to throw 50 million quid down the drain with a mistake, and it does not impact on your perception within the club whether you've made a mistake. Someone else will take the fall for that. It won't be Pep's fault at all, I don't think. And also, Guardiola has this. Still, I think, is benefiting from the fact that the club made it clear they wanted him and nobody else, and they would wait for him as long as it took, and he could have as long as it takes to make it work at City. And no other manager has that brief and that comfort zone. So he can make mistakes with recruitment, he can make mistakes with what he says on TV, how he behaves after a match when he squares up to an opposition player. He can get away with those things, and it's almost as if people think it's not worth having a go at him about it, because he's not going to lose his job.
Let's talk about football, shall we?
Yeah.
City, last team to win at Old Trafford 40 games ago. Are they likely to do the same on Sunday?
Yes, I think so. I think Paul Pogba's injuries swayed it. Before then, it was poised. I'm not saying United can't win, but I think the chances of them doing so have receded a lot with Pogba being out. And City seem so much better than everyone at the moment. I think United included. Just that's what your eyes tell you when you're watching the game. I don't think they change the way they play away from home. It actually might be harder for United to execute an ultra-negative defensive plan at Old Trafford. It might be easier to do that at the Etihad. My money would be in City.
City quite admirably getting all the praise in terms of the way they're approaching the season. There's a relentlessness to them, almost like Fergie-esque in some of their late finishes. Kevin De Bruyne and David Silva, can we just talk a bit about them in terms of they, to me, embody the finer side of the game? Would you agree with that, Abby?
Oh, they're beautiful players, absolutely beautiful. And I think what I like about them is they can be having a quiet game, and yet deep down they will produce something, as they did against West Ham. They will produce something exquisite to turn a match, not just a little bit of fluff. It's a crucial moment, and those sorts of players are so few and far between that know how to turn it on at exactly the right moment. So either what you get with those players is that they dominate a match, and you spend the whole match gushing about the accuracy of their passing and their vision. It's their vision more than anything, because you almost can't train that. You've either got it or you haven't. So they have amazing vision. But the fact is, if the whole team is slightly on the sluggish side, I don't think City have been at their peak for several weeks now. But they will. It's as if what they do, and it's more admirable than just knowing that they've got great technique, is that they can ease into the pace of a game the way maybe the team isn't clicking quite as it should, and adjust that so that when the moment comes they can pounce and get the killer goal. That's what's impressive about them.
I mean, in football, sort of, breaking it down, why I think City are going to win, or the favourites, it is that midfield. I do not see how United keep Silva and De Bruyne quiet. Apart from Matic, Jose doesn't really have the tools to lock up a midfield. He doesn't trust Herrera. He now doesn't have Pogba. Michael Carrick's out. You're then looking at Scott McTominay and younger players to come in, or putting Phil Jones if he's fit. In that, I do not see how they keep that midfield quiet. And, he lost the midfield against Liverpool when he went away. He lost the midfield battle against Chelsea. Probably didn't win it against Spurs, even though they won the game. And it's an area of weakness for United when that Pogba-Matic combination isn't there. And it's obviously City's biggest strength.
What's your view on Lingard? Should he get the credit that he deserves? He hasn't had it, has he?
Yeah, no, he hasn't had it at all, and it's been a strange kind of syndrome of fans being negative about a homegrown player. You see that at other clubs. It's a strange thing in English football. I don't understand it. But he is a player that makes everyone else better. Other players love playing with him. He was the guy that came in under Van Gaal and suddenly, right at the end of Van Gaal's reign, made the attacking part of that game make sense, because he knitted things together. He made Martial and Rashford better. He loves playing with Pogba and Lukaku. you can see what he brings, and centrally he's a very, very good player because he's got pace. He can drive when he's got the ball. He doesn't have to beat players. That's the flow in playing him wide. He doesn't beat players, but give him some space to run with the ball into, and he's fantastic. And he's been arguably United's best player apart from De Gea in the last couple of games.
We're very quick to label people, aren't we? And so he got labelled very young, very early as a player who could only turn it on against the weaker teams and just wasn't scoring enough. But there is more to a player like Lingard than that, and you have to nurture them. And as you say, it's how the other players feed off someone who's that dangerous and that quick.
Because that's another thing that's always thrown at Mourinho. Doesn't trust young players, but he is showing a degree of faith in a player like Lingard. And to be honest, there is that tradition that I think he's probably mindful of.
Yeah, no, I mean that's something he has to deal with, Mourinho, that Pep Guardiola does not have to deal with. Nobody at City is asking Guardiola about, are you buying into the City tradition? No one's quite sure what it is anymore. Anyway, it's now the tradition is we've got money, let's spend it and let's win things. And if you want to do that in style, then Guardiola's your man. No one is questioning how he does things, whereas constantly at Man United, the words history, tradition, respect are brought into the equation.